Well, hey, happy Friday. Welcome. It's August 11th. This is Up North News Radio for this Friday morning. I'm Pat Kreitlow back here, back home on Lake Wissota after a couple of days in Madison and Milwaukee. Coming up, we'll start with a couple of Wisconsin cases related to democracy getting up off the mat and fighting back. One deals with the fake electors and a civil lawsuit against them. The other is a new lawsuit that would restore absentee ballot drop boxes. We'll also look at the growing number of instances where U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has shifted further from a careless beneficiary to a callous freeloader, accepting dozens of vacations, private jet and helicopter flights, resort stays, VIP access, all unreported in a way that would have ended the career of any other judge. So we'll talk to Mark Jacob about that, Keya Vakil, Dan Schumacher, and much more coming up on this Friday as part of a radio show that gets started at 6:06 every morning. So if you're watching this later on video, you can run this ahead 4 minutes and we'll get the show started. We'll be right back. And Aaron, you're looking for a little bit more gain over here?
Yes.
All right. Hopefully that is more to your liking.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, hey, there you go. No. All right, now we have a 7:15 song. Oh, I hate these ads. Okay.
All across Wisconsin from Civic Media, this is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Wissota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
And he's not lying this time. Hey there, Wisconsin. Good morning. Welcome to the state of Wisconsin Sense. Back home from the shores of Lake Wissota, where it's a beautiful Friday morning up north on this August 11th, 2023. Gosh, it's good to be home. 65 degrees up here on Lake Wissota right now. I'll get you some other temperatures from around the state later. I was calling up the radar because the rain came through here right about 4 o'clock this morning. And it's an impressive system on the radar here. It's from way up in western Ontario, basically down through the arrowhead of Minnesota, through Duluth. It's stretched down to Rochester, La Crosse, through eastern Iowa, down to northern Missouri. Just a big line of showers. And now it's just about cutting down the middle of the state, the leading edge of it, running basically, from Minocqua down to Madison, and will be moving its way across the state. A full updated forecast from Weatherology for the weekend, including the chance of some thunderstorms tonight in some places. A nice day tomorrow, but maybe cooler with rain on Sunday. All those details coming up about an hour from now. Here's what's on tap this morning. Democracy is off the mat and fighting back. A Wisconsin judge on Thursday set a trial date for a civil lawsuit filed against the 10 fake Wisconsin Trump electors and rejected a move to dismiss the case. Meanwhile, Republicans are trying to fight a separate lawsuit which would undo the current ban on absentee ballot drop boxes. We'll review those cases, then later we'll talk to Courier Newsroom national correspondent Keya Vakil on how Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has made another move to undo the will of the voters in that state. Not at all any kind of fascist or racist undertones with the stunt that he pulled the other day in Florida. Then in our second hour, the reputation of conservative U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has shifted further from just a careless beneficiary to callous freeloader, as dozens of vacations, private jet flights, private helicopter flights, resort stays, and all sorts of VIP access are discovered and have been unreported in a way that would have ended the career of any other judge, and I would dare say any liberal Supreme Court justice. We will talk to Mark Jacob about unbalanced media coverage of the latest right-wing legal troubles, and we'll talk to Dan Schumacher about sports as well. Along the way, if you have comments on any of these stories or more, ring us up at 844-967-2789. Again, 844-967-2789. I say that twice because I'm stalling a bit as I turn the phones on up here on my Lake Wissota computer so I can see that you called in, even though Aaron Zomers is, of course, riding herd on the phone down there as well at the Civic Media headquarters in Madison, where I'm guessing it's, now that I know in person how things work there, Aaron, good morning. It's probably another warm one there.
Yeah, good morning. And yes, it is toasty. I think before I head out today, I definitely am going to look into that thermostat timer.
Or maybe the last person leaving could make some adjustment with some duct tape, maybe a hammer, whatever it takes. You deserve, now that I've been down there and see your conditions, you need a little bit more comfort than what you're getting.
It's still a big step up from the last place.
I got that. That's true, but we don't have to settle for that. So I'm going to be your one man union steward here to try to get things better for you here. Our email address is radio@upnorthnewswi.com. And of course, if you're watching on one of the Facebook feeds that we have here, you can put a comment up and we'll see that. And I should add this more regularly. If you use the Civic Media app, now that, again, I know down there, it's so much easier to see your text messages when you send those in too. So do feel free to make this show even more interactive, even if you're not looking to talk on the radio. If you want to make a comment on, something you saw in sports or the movies, anything that might shift the subject along, we'd be very happy to do that here. So back home after one of those days where it's not the entire state that I had to drive yesterday, and other people do have longer drives on a more regular basis, but there really is something about either starting your day at, say, the Hone Bridge in Milwaukee and then ending up north, or vice versa, where you really get to see such a great cross-section of the state. And I know from my time in the legislature that there are people who would make that drive from, from the Ashland Bayfield area all the way down to Madison on, a weekly basis, maybe sometimes more often if need be. And we have so many amazing, swaths of the state to see, whether you're going, from west to east all along Highway 29 or 10 or 8, or just taking the interstate like I did. And we are fortunate to have the network that we do here in Wisconsin. It doesn't happen by itself, which kind of gets me back to yesterday's topic of politicians who are allergic to spending money, when spending money is what keeps the roads paved and, what keeps our kids educated and everything like that. When you do the maintenance, and Governor Tony Evers likes to talk about, how he's been fixing the damn roads since he became governor. When you look at the ongoing maintenance that needs to be done, that is nothing more than a symbol of caring for the place where you live. I mean, if you've ever swept off, your front porch stoop or whatever the case may be, if you put a little effort into slapping on a new coat of paint, that's done out of a measure of pride, not because you feel like foolishly tossing away money. So again, as somebody who has to drive all over Wisconsin for all of my many roles over the years, I just want to again express my thanks for those who actually practice good stewardship, not just of the land in its natural form, but in some of the infrastructure as well. All right, we've got headlines to get to coming up in just a bit on this Friday morning. But this reminder, wherever you're driving and listening across Wisconsin, when you're here, you're up north. We'll be back.
I do hear crickets and like a fan or something faintly on your end. I don't know if that means I just need to turn it up higher on my end and we turn the gain down again slightly, or if we just keep turning it up and down all hour. I don't know.
Yeah, because I do have a fan.
But normally I don't hear that.
Oh, yeah, the crickets are out there. You're hearing the crickets, huh? Okay. Yeah, because my gain is just about as high as it goes. So,
Okay.
I wish. Oh, wait a minute. We can make that adjustment here now in StreamYard. Let's try that.
So yeah, then if you turn your gain on your microphone slightly down and I turn it up in StreamYard,
Let's try that.
then we probably won't hear the crickets as much.
Okay, so you want me turning? Let me turn the gain down and turn the volume up. Okay, so I've turned the gain down. I've turned the volume up.
Yeah, that should be good. And then the crickets are a lot quieter.
Okay. This is the anniversary of the release of the George Lucas movie American Graffiti. We'll talk about the year and its impact coming up in today's music break and history lesson, coming up a little later on this hour. Again, our numbers here, 844-967-2789. We'd love to have you along with any input that you have on news of the day. This is normally the time where I tell you what's in the daily newsletter that Christina Laurie puts together for Up North News. And in my haste to get settled back in after arriving last night from Milwaukee, I realized I haven't put that in my notes yet. So we're all going to learn together what's in here. Well, a typical Friday morning newsletter from Christina that you can get at UpNorthNewsWI.com. Also includes a section called In Case You Missed It. And so links to other stories on our website. For example, people reacting to the news that Old Style Beer is returning home to La Crosse after 24 years. How to see the, Aaron, is it called the Persid Media Shower, I think? Also 14 Wisconsin State Fair foods that are ranked and reviewed. Wisconsin's mascot returns to the streets of Madison, and how the new progressive majority on the Wisconsin State Supreme Court can affect you. So for that and clearly a lot more as I scroll through here that Christina's put on, sign up for that newsletter again, UpNorthNewsWI.com. Check out the website for all of our latest news stories. And again, our social media posts. By and large, you'll find us on social media by searching for Up North News WI. Don't forget the WI so you get just the right Up North News site. Aaron was telling me during the break that you could hear the crickets in the background here and maybe even the whir of a fan. So we were playing with the audio levels here. And it reminded me that a neighbor on our street said, "Oh, I was going to honk my horn at you as I was driving by the other morning, but I thought you wouldn't like that." And I said, "No, actually, I would. I think that'd be great if for a home-based radio show as this is for now, that if you're hearing this, if you're hearing, the farmer across the way, running the tractor past and whatnot, I don't have an issue with that whatsoever. So we're all about the natural sound here. And if that includes the crickets, that's great because you know what? It won't be that much longer and we won't be hearing the crickets because they'll be covered by a layer of snow. So I'm going to take this, while I can get it. This is normally where I would tell you about the Milwaukee Brewers and how they did, but they were off yesterday, getting set to start a long road trip, and that trip starts this evening in Chicago with a matchup with the Chicago White Sox. So we'll be following that over the weekend. We'll hopefully on Monday be able to tell you that they're still your first place Milwaukee Brewers, depending on how things go against their old American League rival. So let's give a listen over the weekend to the Brewers on Oshkosh Air Support and also on News from the Center in Richland Center. All right, as noted in headlines, a Wisconsin judge yesterday allowed a civil lawsuit filed against 10 fake electors for former President Donald Trump to proceed and rejected a move to dismiss the case. The lawsuit is moving ahead after the Attorney General in Michigan filed felony charges last month against their 16 Republicans who acted as fake electors for Trump, submitting false certificates that claimed they were the legitimate electors despite Joe Biden's victory in the state. It's all part of a scheme that was hatched by members of the Trump campaign. It's all part of the latest indictment that Donald Trump has been charged with. A tentative trial date has been set in Trump's case for early January of next year. But back to the Wisconsin lawsuit. It was filed by two of the legitimate Biden electors here in Wisconsin and another voter. And it seeks $2.4 million from the fake electors and two of Trump's attorneys, alleging that they were part of a conspiracy by Trump and his allies to try to overturn his loss in the 2020 presidential race. It also seeks to disqualify the Republicans from ever serving as electors again. Republicans again claimed that they were simply there as a legal contingency to preserve an ongoing legal strategy. But as has long since been determined, there was no legal strategy. There was no fraud, and they knew going in that there wouldn't be, that they were going to claim fraud. And so this whole thing does appear to be part of a concocted scheme. The only question really is the deniability of the fake electors themselves. Were they duped, or were they, much like the getaway driver in a bank robbery, they were still part of the process, despite, how little or how much they were involved. One of the attorneys, bringing the lawsuit said he was pleased that, the trial will move forward, saying our democracy matters, that according to attorney Scott Thompson, so we must seek accountability for those who attempt to undermine it. Dane County Circuit Judge Frank Remington has scheduled this case, this civil lawsuit, to go to trial by jury in September of 2024. That's just 2 months before the next presidential election. And again, there were fake elector slates in other states as well. But in this particular one, you've got the civil lawsuit, but you also have a complaint that has been filed against them that was brought with the Wisconsin Elections Commission. And it should be noted that this same judge, Frank Remington, back in May, ordered that the Wisconsin Elections Commission must listen to that complaint again. Previously, they did not take any action on this complaint against the fake electors. But as we all noted in jaw-dropping astonishment at the time, one of the commissioners didn't recuse himself. One of the Republican members of the Wisconsin Elections Commission, Bob Spindell. Why should he have recused himself? Because he was one of the fake electors. And he still is on the Wisconsin Elections Commission, despite all of this. And so the judge said the commission has to hear it again, this time without Spindell. On another matter, Republican state legislative leaders and other Republican-leaning groups are moving to intervene on a separate lawsuit filed not long ago that seeks to undo the current ban on absentee ballot drop boxes and other measures that have restricted voting in Wisconsin. Both the Republican Party of Wisconsin and the Republican National Committee filed a motion on Tuesday to intervene in the case. That, according to Milwaukee Journal Sentinel reporter Tylen Katzenberger in an article that is in this morning's edition. Republicans are trying to cast the effort to undo the voting restrictions as some kind of an attack on election integrity. Rona Romney McDaniel, the RNC chairwoman, says election integrity is, quote, under attack from far left dark money groups bent on destroying basic voting safeguards. This from the group that gerrymandered the maps and continued to try to make it tougher to vote. Democratic groups note that the restrictions on drop boxes unnecessarily disenfranchise voters. They say in the lawsuit that drop boxes are, quote, critical for voters, some of whom are unable to vote in person because of disability or scheduling conflicts or a lack of transportation or other hardship. And this is all true. It's true that drop boxes were nothing new in Wisconsin, had been used for a long time. Not only did Republicans not have an issue with drop boxes previously, they got on board with them before Democrats did in terms of truly encouraging absentee voting by their older party members and activists. It's just that Democrats eventually caught up and said, yeah, we should be encouraging that, encouraging early voting, encouraging the use of drop boxes for convenience. But then Trump lost. And again, as we noted, he was going to flail at anything, any kind of excuse, trying to grab some kind of either a legal toehold or an argument that would resonate with enough Americans. And that included attacking absentee balloting, early voting, drop boxes, and constantly implying that there was something corrupt about them without a shred of evidence. And now, as we mentioned a couple of weeks back, you see that most of the rest of the Republican Party has come back to the notion of encouraging people to vote early. They're no longer going along with parroting his lines of, oh, there must be something funny about absentee ballots. There must be something funny about early voting. No, they're back on board with that. They even got Trump to say something to that effect a couple of weeks back. So if that's the case, then let's undo the theater that conservative justices on the Wisconsin State Supreme Court went along with when they banned drop boxes. And let's again let the Wisconsin Elections Commission have the ability to offer the guidance that's necessary to make voting as easy and convenient as possible for everybody who is eligible to vote. So this will now come up before the Wisconsin Supreme Court, almost assuredly it will, which is now under progressive control. That does not necessarily mean that it will change. The progressive majority could just as easily look at the way statutes are written right now and make some other type of determination. But it is well and good that they do take another look at it. It's just that with Republican legislators saying that they're now going to intervene in this lawsuit as well to try to uphold the drop box restrictions, it's worth noting that the Republican legislators will need lawyers to, argue on their behalf in this case. Who's going to pay for that? You and I will pay for this. Taxpayers, once again, will foot the bill for attorneys that are helping Republicans in court make it harder for the rest of us to vote. But that's what we face, as we move forward here and try to, again, restore voting rights for as many people as we possibly can. One more quick note, and we're going to talk more about this with Mark Jacob in our second hour. But in case you won't be around, we want to share the news that ProPublica has continued to investigate the travels of Justice Clarence Thomas and the things that he has been willing to accept from people. And that would maybe be fine if they were disclosed. But he hasn't disclosed them. He's disclosed basically the some of the smaller items, basically the equivalent of a cup of coffee here. But there's actually so much more, according to a new ProPublica report. The gifts that he has received and not disclosed have included at least 38 vacations, 26 private jet flights, 8 flights by helicopter, a dozen VIP passes to sporting events, stays at luxury resorts in Florida and Jamaica. And Thomas appears to have broken the law by failing to disclose flights, cruises, and sports tickets. What needs to happen here is a measure of accountability, and all I ask you to do is replace the name of Clarence Thomas, with the name of any liberal Supreme Court justice. And you tell me what Republicans in the United States Senate would be doing right now, and you know exactly what they would be doing. And they would probably be right if a progressive judge was invested in that much corruption of accepting gifts from billionaires, some of whom have cases before the court. Courier Newsroom national correspondent Keya Vakil is coming up next. You're Up North.
By the way, I did see that other comment, and I'm trying to get that figured out.
Okay. Thank you, Colette. Appreciate that. And Roger, we saw your comment about the quality of the signal over at Homegrown Radio, WFHR Wisconsin Rapids, and we're looking into that and try to get that all fixed for you as well. Again, the whole notion of the secret show here during the commercial break is to be full service. You got things you want to share with us here, little notes. We can just talk amongst ourselves. Or you can just listen to me gulp coffee.
That is always an option.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get some water. Be right back.
Yep. Oh, see, now I like this. We got. Let me take down this thing here so I can put up Beth's comment. Look at this now. Beth asks if there's a topic yet. She just tuned in. See, this is what I like. You can catch up this way as well. Now, we just got done talking about a lawsuit against the fake Trump electors is being allowed to move forward. We talked about a separate lawsuit that looks to undo the current ban on drop boxes in Wisconsin. And we're about to talk to Keya Vakil coming up in just seconds. We're back now on Up North News Radio with our good friend Keya Vakil, Courier Newsroom's national correspondent out on the left coast. Keya, hello. Thanks for being here.
Hello, Pat. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we've got a busy week, kind of a hodgepodge of things that are not typical for a week. It's not every week that you have a special election, especially one in another state that we would be paying attention to. But a lot of folks paid attention to a special election in Ohio this week. And did I see right? Is this thing like costing northwards of $30 million to hold this turkey of a referendum that ultimately failed?
Yeah, that is what Ballotpedia, which is sort of an online database of all things elections, estimated. This was an estimate last week that said it was over 32 million, roughly split 50-50. And again, this was a week ago, or several days ago. So that number could be 35 million, 40 million. The last few days before an election are always, you see a flood of TV ads and mailers. So it'll be probably another few days at least before we get a final number, but it's a ton of money.
That's a lot of money for what would have been I continually refer to it as essentially, moving the goalposts on, what it takes to amend the Ohio State Constitution. So with that attempt having been shot down, you don't need a supermajority. You just stick with the majority rules that you've always had. Ohio has to do this all over again now for the actual abortion constitutional question in November, don't they?
They do indeed. So this, there's going to be a measure on the ballot in November that will would override Ohio's current abortion ban. This measure is not this one yesterday is not, or on Tuesday is not quite a perfect indicator, but it's pretty close. I think you can expect that, barring some massive sea change in the electorate or in the current state of issues in the country, you can expect that voters will want to support abortion rights in Ohio again. We've seen that in Kansas and Kentucky and pretty much every state where it's been on the ballot, which is why you saw Republicans try to rush this past election through, try to sort of throw every which strategy at the wall to see what might work, and none of them did. Voters support abortion. The really intense anti-trans rhetoric they used was ineffective, and perhaps most obviously, I'm not sure why they thought getting voters to give up more of their own power would be effective. It clearly was not.
No, and so you have conservatives and Republicans who once again are demonstrated clearly that they're not in line with mainstream values. But that takes us to the Milwaukee presidential primary debate for the Republicans coming up now in under 2 weeks. And we'll talk about the field, who's qualified for the debate so far. And I know it's going to be on Fox, and so therefore I can't say that the questions are going to be as, what you and I would write. But you would think one of the questions has to be, what are you going to do? Are you going to stick to your far right response, or are you able to see now that the Republican Party, or at least its presidential candidates, have to come a little bit, have to moderate their positions off the extremes of the abortion question? I just wonder if they'll be asked about that in Milwaukee.
I'm sure there will be an abortion-related question, especially coming on the heels of the Ohio result. How they answer that will tell us a lot. There is no consensus within the Republican Party on how to handle this. The fact that voters hate their position on it. I think at this point, it's safe to say that with certainty. That's why you see, even Donald Trump, who overturned Roe v. Wade, he has talked about that, but he has very much shied away from any further restrictions. You see Mike Pence going in the total opposite direction, calling for a national ban. And then there's like everything in between, basically. And so they're really caught in a tricky situation, though, because their primary base wants an abortion ban, but the vast majority of general election voters don't. So anything they say to try to help themselves now will only hurt them next year.
Yeah, without a doubt. Do we know roughly who all is in, or I guess it's almost like the NCAA tournament. Do we know who's on the bubble of maybe not making it?
Yeah, so we do know who's in. The folks who have qualified as of this week are former President Donald Trump, who is not committed to doing the debate yet, but he has qualified. Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, has qualified. Tim Scott, the South Carolina senator, Nikki Haley, the former South Carolina governor, they've both qualified. Vivek Ramaswamy, who is the sort of anti-woke tech entrepreneur, has qualified, as has Chris Christie, Doug Burgum, and Mike Pence. So most of the field is going to be on the stage, which, means it could be, a complete clown car similar to 2016.
Oh, it feels like just haven't learned much of anything. Well, let's talk about Ron DeSantis on there, who will again be able to, crow about taking, again, this extreme, quote unquote, law and order position, because this week, for the second time, he, as governor of Florida, has removed an elected official from their position because he didn't like what they were doing. It's an amazing power that a governor has, and very recklessly used, it appears, by DeSantis.
Yeah, and it's a question of whether he's legally allowed to do this, but questions of legality seem to matter increasingly little to Ron DeSantis. So on Wednesday, he suspended the elected state attorney of the Orlando area, Monique Worrell, who is a Democrat and a Black woman. She was elected again by the people of the Orlando area overwhelmingly. But because she has ideological differences with Governor DeSantis, he has suspended her from her position. The same thing he did last year to a different prosecutor who he disagreed with. I don't think it is a coincidence that this is coming after he's had just an absolutely brutal stretch of campaigning. His poll numbers are slagging. His donations are a mess. He's fired his campaign manager. His donors are abandoning him. And even the polling shows that, his obsessive focus on woke isn't resonating. Voters care more about the traditional Republican, often racist, but, law and order, hard on crime strategies. And so he's doing that because he sees that that's his potentially only path back to being competitive. And so, he is going back to the well of things that have served him well in Florida because he can't figure out how to run nationally.
Right. And again, helpful in a primary, going to be helpful in red states if he were to become the nominee, but does absolutely nothing in a general election setup. So while we're on the subject of conservatives being out of touch, there's the United States Supreme Court and polling that is being done on them. And again, with a lifetime appointment, what do you care what the polling says? But I always find it interesting to see what the American people think of a court that has become increasingly political. What are Americans saying nowadays?
Yeah, they are not thrilled with the Supreme Court. Approval of the court sits at 40%, according to a July survey from Gallup, which is a nonpartisan organization that surveys a host of different issues, the Americans' views on different issues. And they've been tracking, views of the court for over 2 decades. And 40% is the lowest approval rating ever. And that's been the number for most of the past couple of years. And, you see that decline predated the Dobbs decision last year, actually. But, you've seen that number continue to erode, particularly among Democrats in the aftermath of the Dobbs decision, which repealed Roe v. Wade. The decline is mostly among Democrats and independents. Republican support for the court of Republican voters support has actually increased in the last couple of years, which tells you a lot. Because what the court's been doing is, taking away the right to abortion, targeting LGBTQ individuals, striking down gun safety laws, striking down worker protection laws, making it harder for unions to organize, a host of things that are extremely ideologically right-wing. And, so they've gained a couple points with Republican voters, but, 17% of Democrats now approve of the court, which is just an abysmal number.
And yet, turning to the Democrats now, they are, again, not doing nearly enough to endear themselves to, moderate or independent voters. The polling numbers for President Biden aren't nearly what he would like them to be. And yet here we sit a year after, the CHIPS Act passed, and of course the Inflation Reduction Act with all of the provisions there that are going to tackle climate change while adding jobs at the same time. And yet, still there's this disconnect. Do you get the impression any mainline Democrats are sounding alarm bells, or are they actually going to start responding to this and telling Americans more about what exactly they've done and what is still in the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely the sounding of alarms. I also think there's a few reasons I think this disconnect exists. I think one, a lot of this genuinely impactful transformative legislation is for infrastructure and manufacturing and energy, things that take years to really ramp up and see the results of. And so when voters are faced with, a year and a half of high costs, as they have been for, since mid 2021 into early 2023, what's coming in a few years is harder to sell them on. The second thing is Democrats are not the best at messaging issues. It also, Biden has had an incredible first term in terms of accomplishments, but the man is not the most eloquent speaker, let's say. And so, he's not Barack Obama, who could deliver a rousing speech pretty much every week of the year. And so it's harder to break through when you're kind of just a, more generic speaker like he is. But that is why you need, you've seen them try to have like Pete Buttigieg go out and talk more, and folks like that. And I also think the third issue is that, as inflation has dropped and wages have grown, that's been happening for several months now. But I think the longer that goes on, you'll start to see more voters feel better about things. Ideally, for the Democrats, from their perspective, that'll really start to kick in early next spring, assuming the economy continues to trend upwards. I do think you'll see some numbers shift in their direction. But the last issue is, the media spent 2 years slagging on the economy. And even now we're seeing, as the numbers are better, there's still always a, it's often framed in the, but will it hold? Or,
Yes.
The way they frame things is not the same way they did during the Trump era, even if the underlying numbers are very similar. And media does matter. The way you frame things, that's what people read. That's what they see on TV. So it matters.
It is. And they're always erring on the side of doom and gloom. Yes, lest they be accused of becoming cheerleaders for simply, saying what the economy is doing in terms of its positive numbers. However, when the president does want to speak and speak from the heart, he does do so eloquently. And that included recent remarks about book banning. And I think he just came right out and said it, that book banning is about as un-American as it gets.
Yeah, President Biden, like you said, once in a while he really hits. And on Tuesday, he was at the Grand Canyon in Arizona, highlighting a separate effort. But he did take time to, criticize those who are trying to ban books, whether it's, that's happening in a lot of states across the country. It's back to school season now. We're going to see more stories about groups like Moms for Liberty, which is a far-right group that tries to get books banned from schools and libraries. They're going to keep doing that, even though it's really unpopular. And so Biden pretty much said, if you're banning books, you're trying to ban our history, and we only learn, and, we need to learn the truth to fully recognize our history and make America, live up to the promise of its founding. And that's something that you would think everyone could agree on, but apparently nowadays that is just only one party holds that position.
It's weird that only one party holds the position of being for science, for education, and for voting rights. And yet that's where we find ourselves in the year 2023. Courier Newsroom National Correspondent Keya Vakil. Hey, thanks so much. As always, hope you have a great weekend.
You bet. Thanks, Pat.
All right, we'll take a break here. Again, you can read what Keya does over at our website, Courier Newsroom, or UpNorthNewsWI.com. You could look on CourierNewsroom.com too, but it's so much faster to head directly to the source, UpNorthNewsWI.com. Today's history lesson and music break coming up in just a bit. You're Up North.
One, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. Put your glad rags on.
It would be fair to say that the first big revival of 50s oldies music kicked off on this day in 1973 when the film American Graffiti by this new up-and-coming director named George Lucas opened in theaters. It was set in 1962 and created a wave of nostalgia for songs from the 50s and early 60s. It led to the creation of the TV series Happy Days. And it also set in place, in my mind, a way of doing the math. Because as a kid in the mid-70s, the music from the mid-50s was ancient to me. I hadn't been born yet. And yet, once I got to be an adult and did the math and said, oh, so really only 20 years back and they're doing a nostalgia wave, that would mean right now there'd be young people who are hearing music from the year 2003 who think that's ancient history. That's depressing. Let's do some birthdays. Eric Carmen is 74 years old today. He had some solo hits, but you first heard him with the Raspberries. This is the same guy rocking out here who did songs like All By Myself. He was born in Cleveland on this day in 1957. This is Go All the Way. On this day in 1992, the Mall of America opened in Bloomington, Minnesota, then the biggest mall in the country. Turns 31 years old today, and I have to say that as someone who lived near there when it opened, and at the time had an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, that was manna from heaven. To be able to take your young daughters to a mall with an amusement park in the middle of it, any time of year. It gets a little cold up here in the Midwest during the wintertime. The mall's definitely had its ups and downs. There's a top level that was like the entertainment district for a while in the Twin Cities, and now is pretty well abandoned except for a comedy club and a Hooters. Joe Jackson is 69 years old today, born in Stratfordshire, England, on this day in 1954. He had songs like Always Something Breaking Us in Two, and of course this one is Steppin' Out. While we wait for him to actually begin singing some lyrics to us, I'll tell you that it was on this day in 1929 Babe Ruth became the first baseball player to hit 500 home runs with a dinger in Cleveland. Actor Chris Hemsworth is 40 years old today. And it was on this day in 1995 that a movie opened starring Michelle Pfeiffer as an inner-city school teacher. Dangerous Minds opened in theaters this day in 1995 with Coolio's Gangsta's Paradise on the soundtrack. And this is the part where we find out, did Aaron play the Coolio version, or is he about to punk us with some Weird Al Yankovic?
Not this time. This is the real one.
Okay, but what do you actually hear in your head when you hear this coming up? What are the first words?
My mind is gone. I'm the man of the land. I'm into discipline. I've got a Bible in my hand and a beard on my chin. Yeah, I know all the words to Irish Paradise.
I know you do, and it's one of the many reasons I admire you and yet worry about you at the same time. And finally, on this day in 2009, Lady A, known then as Lady Antebellum, releases perhaps the quintessential song about drunk dialing.
For me it happens all the time. It's a 1:15. I'm all alone and I need you now.
It's really too bad our cell phones, in the middle of the night don't have like a little message that flashes on saying, remember, you promised never to call this loser ever again. The crossover hit went to number 1 on the country chart and number 2 on the Hot 100 chart and sold some 9 million digital downloads. And that's our history lesson and music break for today. Well, one little sports note, just because I don't know if I've ever asked Aaron the degree to which he follows the English Premier League, but a new season gets underway this weekend. And where did I see the story? It was basically about NBC Sports. This is now they're going to be their 11th season of covering the Premier League. And when they first got that contract, I recall thinking at the time that was, quite the gamble because, people knew of soccer, but would they really know it from the standpoint of following it on TV, on American TV with any regularity? Now, I can't tell you if it's been a moneymaker for NBC or not, but they certainly have embraced it. They've paid for the contract, so they're going with it, and they say they're just continuing to grow the fan base. And frankly, the 20 top clubs in England all have U.S. followings of some sort or another. We probably, a lot of us know it better from just following, the series Ted Lasso. But in terms of the actual sport, Aaron, was there ever a time that you followed that or had a favorite team, anything like that?
Not really. Some of my friends were into it, but I didn't really used to be into sports at all, honestly. Mm-hmm. Especially because by the time I was old enough to make my own decisions about what I was watching on TV, I found out about things like CTE and American football, and I was
sure.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, nope. I totally understand that. I know that in the beginning, if somebody said, "Would you follow a club?" I would have said Chelsea, because that's the name of our younger daughter. And we did not know that at the time when we had her, but later discovered there was a Chelsea soccer team, and so, we actually did have. I got her a little Chelsea jersey, and we followed them for some time. I think that's kind of faded. My real introduction to the fandom of the Premier League came during those 3 years that I lived in the Caribbean on Grand Cayman, which is a British territory. So there were a lot of things to get used to in terms of, British government and the currency system, the financial system, the political system. But again, because of the time zone change, any Saturday morning, if you woke up early and you looked at some of the pubs around Georgetown, I mean, they are busy as all get out the way that American bars are, on a Sunday afternoon for football. But they're going strong 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, getting ready for English Premier League matches. And so, yes, of course, it does have worldwide fandom, and it is growing in the United States. And it will be, airing again starting this weekend with NBC airing matches on Peacock and USA Network as well, trying to again bolster interest in the Premier League. We've received a couple of comments from folks who are watching our live feed on Facebook about things. We'll try to address some of those about topics that are in the news. And we'll also have Mark Jacob and Dan Schumacher coming up in the second hour of Up North News Radio. When we continue on this Friday, we'll be back. You're Up North.
All right. I think what I just messaged about is fixed.
Okay, good.
But yes, I think I will need the StreamYard recording for the podcast.
I am writing that note right now.
Cool.
Park or forest near you and music inspired by nature. Discover theforest.org. Brought to you by USDA Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
The Maggie Dawn Show.
Wisconsin's manner of funding local government is nearly singular in the country. That cheese stands alone, if you will. It hasn't been working in Milwaukee. It hasn't been working in Rhinelander. It hasn't been working in La Crosse, Green Bay, Madison, Kenosha, Racine. I don't care what you pick. It ain't working.
The Maggie Dawn Show, Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. on your local Civic Media radio station and on the Civic Media app. You know him as the nose tackle for the green and gold, 1993 to 1999, and again 2001 to 2003. 125 games, 292 tackles, 7 sacks.
There's a Twitter post. Well, so Dan Schaefer said the other day, or yesterday, Wisconsin, we still can't even legalize medical marijuana, SMH. Minnesota, we've got THC seltzers now and business is booming, and linked to an article. Someone retweeted it. And is talking about, has anyone even asked why the left is so diehard in getting pot legalized? I'm not talking medical cannabis, because people have been getting that for decades in Wisconsin. I'm talking getting the door opened for all cannabis legalization. It's almost like they want you a dumb pothead.
Okay.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense.
Make it make
And
sense.
people are like, where are you getting medical weed in Wisconsin? You're like, you're naive. It's okay. I understand. Like, I work in healthcare. If you know something I don't, let me know. Like, no, you just don't have the right connections. You're like, that doesn't sound medicinal.
80 million listeners depend on AM radio each month. It's also the backbone of the emergency alert.
All across Wisconsin from Civic Media, this is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Wissota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
And it is nice to be back home here on Lake Wissota for the second hour of Up North News Radio for this Friday, August 11th, 2023. Nice to have you along on this National Play in the Sand Day. It says here on the National Day calendar. And we know that National Play in the Sand Day is a popular thing because sand, of all things, is in the National Toy Hall of Fame. This is something that was brought to my attention by another program that every year takes issue with at least some of the nominees. The National Toy Hall of Fame is in Rochester, New York, and the original inductees back in 1998-99 included Barbie, of course, Crayola crayons, Etch-a-Sketch, Frisbee, hula hoop, Legos, Lincoln Logs, marbles, Monopoly, Play-Doh, the teddy bear. You get the idea. So there were these 17 original inductees, and then every year 2 or 3 or 4 other toys are voted into the National Toy Hall of Fame. They include the Slinky, there was Silly Putty, a rocking horse. So some are specific, some are very general. And in 2008, they included the stick. And in 2021, sand, along with things like rubber ducks, chess, Star Wars action figures. And so, Aaron, if you ever find yourself playing with sand or a stick, you'll know you're playing with something that's in the National Toy Hall of Fame.
I'm glad to know that, so that if I ever go on the beach and anyone looks at me weird when I'm just digging myself into the sand, I can
I'm
say
playing with a Hall of Fame toy here,
Yeah, exactly.
It's right up there with Magic 8 Ball and, Matchbox cars, things like that. Of course.
Lincoln Logs, probably.
Yeah, of course, sand and a stick, Goodness. So anyway, enjoy National Play in the Sand Day today. Coming up on the program in this hour, the reputation of conservative Justice Clarence Thomas has shifted further from careless beneficiary to callous freeloader, as dozens of vacations, private jet flights, resort stays, and VIP access are discovered unreported in a way that would have ended the career of any other judge, and I would maintain any liberal Supreme Court justice. We'll talk to Mark Jacob about that and other media coverage of some of the latest right-wing legal troubles. We'll talk to Dan Schumacher and touch on sports a bit. He's fired up because his Chicago Cubs have been on a roll lately, and he's been rather quiet lately about the Brewers having a better season than the Cubs. And now that the Cubs are catching fire, I fear my friend is going to be just downright insufferable. Along the way, if you'd like to reach the show, you can always do that on the studio line at 844-967-2789. We have a lot of comments online through folks that are watching on various Facebook feeds and wanted to address a few of those here. Roger asked, when does Civic Media begin airing on one of the newest stations acquired, that one in Park Falls? And all I can tell you about that, Roger, is hopefully very soon. We'll keep you abreast of how that Park Falls station is moving along. Roger also noted that John Conley, the singer-songwriter of Rose-Colored Glasses, is 77 years old today. We want to thank Jordan Anderson for his comment on our YouTube page, saying happy Friday, and thanks for delivering the news to us all the time, and that's very nice of you. Then there's folks like Beth, who I think is commenting on the Civic Media Facebook page. Well, she began by asking, what are the topics that have been discussed so far today, saying that she just tuned in. She then added that the media is like a strainer and only the liberal court cases are allowed through. That's because we were talking about the fake electors case. And then she later went on to say, votes only count if the liberals get their way. Otherwise, the far left majority-run states will override any conservative win. The short answer to that is, Beth, come on. But now let's go into something slightly deeper. When you say the majority-run states will override any conservative win, we have to get first to the definition of a win. And the definition of a win has been tainted in the United States because of the system that we set up through the Electoral College. The Electoral College cheapens the votes of some Americans. And as a result, a voter in, a place like Wyoming counts more than all of the wasted votes in places like California and New York, where there are so many more people who are liberal or progressive that you don't need those votes in order to win the electoral votes from a state. And so conservatives over the past, generation or more have been under the impression that because there are many red states, that somehow there are these conservative wins that are being offset by liberals, when in fact it's the Electoral College system that is faulty. It's that same logic that has Wisconsin Republicans always saying that they're the ones who have the values of Wisconsinites, and that the votes in places like Madison and Milwaukee don't count for as much, because they're all crammed together, and we out here on these wide open spaces, we're the actual values. But when you go with one person, one vote, as you should, in a state, you see that Wisconsin is still a slightly more progressive state than a conservative one. And you would see that in the country as well if we had national popular vote rather than a rigged electoral college. So it's not that conservatives are being somehow undone by progressive wins. It's that progressives quite frequently actually do have more votes when you count one person, one vote. Our full weatherology forecast is coming up right after this break. This is Up North News Radio for this Friday. I have got to learn to shut up earlier so you get some of the end of those songs in there when you go digging for them.
Oh, yeah. I think we're also supposed to start leaving more bumper music at the beginning and end of segments anyway. I know Corey was talking to me about that.
Okay. I will say that part of it was intentional on my part because I wasn't sure if you let the music go for so long, if it makes it easier that your video gets dinged by the recording companies, then we have to, go through the hoops to get it on. So that actually was kind of intentional on my part. Whenever I hear, like Stu goes very long with his songs. Oh, and yeah. I just envision that the record companies, scream. Yep, always do. Okay.
Yeah, if he did stream, he wouldn't make it through the first segment.
Yes. Let's see. So we're tipping our hat to the soundtrack from American Graffiti this morning, released on this day in 1973, about life in 1962. And the Platters there singing Smoke Gets in Your Eyes would have been a fantastic bumper song here, heading into Jennifer Vachitsky's weatherology forecast on most days. But the smoke has fortunately cleared recently, so that really hasn't been a concern, at least so far. It always is possible it could come back, but right now we're following some showers, maybe even a little thunder that's been moving all across Wisconsin from west to east, and Jennifer tells us about that and how things are looking for tonight and all throughout the Wisconsin weekend in that weatherology forecast. Jennifer, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, as you mentioned, there are a few scattered showers and storms moving through the state today, and we'll be seeing that across the board for everyone, ending a little earlier around southwestern Wisconsin, around Richland Center earlier today, with a slight risk for severe weather, though, as well, a level 2 out of 5 on the severe weather scale, with the main threats looking to be large hail and damaging winds. But there could be some tornado potential for extreme southern Wisconsin, so definitely something we'll keep you posted on as we get through the day today. Temperature-wise, looks to get into the mid to low 80s, a few spots in the upper 70s, like around Wausau and Oshkosh. For the weekend, Saturday, sunny skies for all, with highs in the mid 80s for southern Wisconsin, upper 70s to low 80s Oshkosh northward. Sunday, it looks like a chance for some showers and storms coming in by the afternoon from Wausau down to Madison and for western and over through western Wisconsin. Then a better chance for that rain coming in for the evening hours for everyone, and that'll come in for the eastern Wisconsin in the evening as well. Mid to upper 70s for most, a little warmer lingering in the low to mid 80s, Madison over to Richland Center. Then by Monday, sneak peek at the work week next week, a cold front comes in. Chance for showers and storms continue, a little cooler for everyone, mid to upper 70s for the southern half of the state, low 70s from Wisconsin Rapids over to Baldwin, and an outlier of the upper 60s right around about Oshkosh.
Cooler, but I guess I would say still comfortable. Jennifer, thank you so much. Hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too.
Temperatures around the state right now include 65 degrees up here on Lake Wissota in Chippewa Falls. Madison reporting 71. Hayward 61. Oshkosh 68 degrees. And in Wausau, folks listening to Bull Falls Radio, it is 60. Brewers were off yesterday, getting set for a long road trip. Let me find my little paper schedule that I ripped off the bulletin board. It's off to play the White Sox this evening in Chicago starting at 7:10, so they play tonight. Tomorrow evening, Sunday afternoon. And then they have Monday off for a travel day because they play the LA Dodgers out west Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, all of them starting at 9:10 Central Time. And then they head right away to Texas to play the Rangers next weekend in games Friday night, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. And then they finally come back home to play the Minnesota Twins on Tuesday and Wednesday, not next week, but the week following. So long road trip for the Brewers right now, who are still in first place atop the National League Central Division. We'll see how things pan out by the time they finish a somewhat grueling road trip that's up ahead here. Our studio line number is 844-967-2789. And there's a topic that we haven't discussed a ton here on the show because there's been so many other state budget-related topics to ask about. Here's something that was not in the budget bill, but it's a topic that's not going to go away, and it relates to the Brewers. And an article as led in this morning's Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel by Molly Beck, who puts it in very stark terms. The Milwaukee Brewers could start looking for a new home this fall if state and local officials fail to reach agreement by then on a taxpayer-funded package to fund improvements to American Family Field required in the team's lease with the state. That, according to sources that she talked to, a process, she writes, that might lead the Brewers to the boom towns of Charlotte, North Carolina, or Nashville, Tennessee. This, of course, right away gets some folks triggered to say that this is all corporate blackmail and, this isn't going to stand and the Brewers aren't going to want to go anyplace. They're the Milwaukee Brewers, for goodness sakes. Well, having lived in a place that did lose a team that was, being jerks about threatening to move, the Minnesota North Stars, they became the Dallas Stars. Minnesota eventually got expansion hockey back, but, there were some very lean times there in terms of tourism and the economic impact that a major sports team brings. And Milwaukee is no stranger to losing its teams, having lost the Milwaukee Braves back in the day. And Milwaukee only has the Brewers because the Seattle Pilots folded after only 1 year. So it's not unheard of at all that a team could move. But that's not said in a way that should engender feelings of, corporate blackmail more than it should be about what is the right level of economic development that we all, taxpayers, elected officials, and the private sector, should be investing in order to get the benefits of, in this case, a major league sports team. Put another way, the Brewers need, would need hundreds of millions of dollars to make necessary repairs and upgrades to American Family Field. They're obviously not going to get all of that from the taxpayers. They have to put skin in the game. Governor Evers earlier this year proposed spending $290 million to kick in a state part of a commitment, and then there would be a local commitment sought as well. So it's not going to be the hundreds upon hundreds of millions. The governor is proposing $290 million. Other people would take the position that it should be $0. That if a sports team wants to be here, then they should pay their own way because they get all the benefits. Well, that's not true either because, again, like I said, having a major league franchise in a community or even a minor league franchise in some other Wisconsin communities does pay benefits. There is economic impact. There is tourism. There is sales. And then all the other ancillary business from restaurants to suppliers that go along with it. So the question is, what's the right number? What's the right level of support? And unfortunately, people's judgment gets clouded about the number when they either get angry at the prospect of feeling like they're being, put over a barrel, or if they get, equally passionate in saying, how can you not be supporting this team? It is so great, when admittedly life would go on if you lost a major league team. So how do you take emotion out of it? Well, you can't really. You can't take the emotion out of it. You can't take the politics out of it either. If there were a Republican governor instead of Tony Evers, if Tim Michels had won that race, if he had put $290 million in there, I don't doubt for a minute you'd have Robin Vos, Devin LeMahieu, and every other legislative Republican saying, way to go, Governor Michels. That's exactly the right number. It's not too much. It's not too little. Way to go. Our team, you got it just right. But because it's Governor Tony Evers, it's, that's big spending. It can't be that level at all. Well, somehow along the way, the Republicans controlling the legislature and Governor Evers and local officials, I would argue to a degree as well, have to come up with a figure that they're next going to propose to the Brewers. Because again, there are maintenance issues there already at American Family Field. Of course there are, like any place else. I don't recall the news report that one of the Milwaukee TV stations did, but went behind the scenes and showed, I forget if it was like one of the air conditioning units or chillers at the time, that is, completely broken down, and some of the other things that are starting to, crumble with age, as one would expect over 20 years. That's not unexpected. And yes, the team is responsible for some of that, but it really is a matter of, if the stadium district board has the funds that are necessary to maintain the stadium. And if they don't, if they can't make the repairs and renovations, then why wouldn't the Brewers look and say, well, before this place starts to fall apart, what are our options? And right now, that lease runs out in 2030. And it takes a few years to get something negotiated and prepare for a move. So yes, as early as this fall, when the legislature's back in session, if it appears there's going to be no movement toward a deal, then you wouldn't fault the Brewers for at least saying, well, what are our options? Charlotte would love to have a team. Nashville would love to have a team. I've traveled to both cities fairly recently, and they will be prepared to move heaven and earth in terms of tax incentives to land a Major League Baseball team if they are able to. Now, with the proposal from Governor Tony Evers, what it would have meant, the Brewers would have been willing to go along with extending their lease from 2030 to 2043. And so for a fraction of the state's record budget surplus, the headline could have been, Governor Evers saves baseball in Wisconsin for an additional 13 years. Republicans said no, they're not going to go along with that. But again, to be fair, they're not saying that it's going to be $0, that they're never going to make some kind of a proposal. But this article makes the point that they should start talking this fall. They should see if they can get a deal done this fall and not try to play this, game of brinksmanship or chicken that, so often does not end the way that the parties would like it to. I hope that they take this seriously. There's a lot to talk about in a potential fall legislative session, not just the things we've already hit on about tax cuts and affordable daycare and things like that, but this very real piece of economic impact, not just for the Milwaukee area economy, but for the Wisconsin economy as well. Another story that was in this morning's Journal Sentinel that caught my eye deals with the group Moms for Liberty. And this was actually put up yesterday afternoon by the Journal Sentinel, saying that the group Moms for Liberty, which has been designated by the Southern Poverty Law Center as an extremist anti-government organization, is planning to have a town hall with presidential candidates on the morning of that Republican presidential debate that's going to be held in Milwaukee on August 23rd. Moms for Liberty co-founder Tiffany Justice told the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel that she expected at least 4 presidential candidates to attend the town hall. She did not share their names or locations about the event. And again, Moms for Liberty, not a grassroots organization. This is your classic AstroTurf organization that is extremely well funded by right-wing groups. And it is one that has been working hard on behalf of book banning books from school libraries, very actively opposing efforts to have schools discuss diversity and equity. They have fought ways to engage in social emotional learning. And again, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, they engage in spreading hateful imagery and rhetoric against the LGBTQ community. In Florida, the group advocated for the law known as Don't Say Gay, successfully pushing to prohibit any classroom instruction on gender identity and sexual orientation through high school in the state. And they've advised on many school referenda across Wisconsin. So this is a group that, again, like the Tea Party years ago, is going to claim to have grassroots support, but it's another way for right-wing big money groups to use their Wisconsin connections to try to spread an agenda that is ranging from extremist to hateful. We'll pause here, looking to talk to Mark Jacob on the backside of the break. Right after this, you're Up North.
We got a text from Mark from the Sack about some toys that he had in the 60s. The Mattel Vacuform and Thing Maker. And I looked them up. So the Vacuform, it is a vacuum former. It heats up a sheet of plastic and you form it to something and you push the little button repeatedly to like suck out all the air. And then the Thing Maker is similar where you have molds and you pour in liquid plastic. However, the Thing Maker is known as one of the most dangerous children's toys ever created because the plastic is super toxic.
All right. Basically, you're just going to say all this after the break, and then we'll turn to Mark, assuming he joins us today.
Okay.
That's funny. Thank you, Mark. I think we're going to be markless again.
Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye. Yes, that'll be the day when you make me cry. You say you're gonna leave, you know it's a lie, 'cause that'll be the day when I die. Well,
I sense we're going to be stuck with Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court for a while yet, despite all of these new revelations about him accepting luxury vacations and not disclosing them. But before we get to that, we have mentioned today all the different ways to get in touch with the show, and we're happy about every one of them, not just the phone line at 844-967-2789, but plenty of comments on our Facebook and YouTube pages today. And the text line is part of the Civic Media app. You download the app from your favorite app store, wherever you get them from. And not only can you listen to all the different Civic Media radio stations there, you can call into shows from there. You can text directly to the show. And Mark from the SAC is using it to send a text, getting back to our discussion at the top of the hour, Aaron, about toys, the things that are in the Toy Hall of Fame. But then there are things that Mark brings up that should decidedly not be in a Toy Hall of Fame and should not be in a toy box, period.
Yeah, so Mark said, your toy talk this morning brought back some memories. I had loads of fun with my Mattel Vacuform and Thing Maker making creepy crawlers and mini dragons back in the mid to late 60s. And I thought that sounded really interesting, so I looked those up. The Vacuform is a vacuum former, as you might expect from the name. So it takes a sheet of plastic and heats it up with a hot plate, and you melt it onto a mold to make shapes. Like you can make little toy cars. You can even, if you have another toy that's not going to melt on the hot plate, you can just stick it in there and form the plastic around it and make a duplicate, basically, which is pretty cool.
Okay.
It's just you have an exposed hot plate.
Yes, I mean, who wouldn't give their kid a hot plate to play with, right?
But much more dangerous is the Thing Maker, which is similar, except it just melts liquid plastic into a mold. And that's also pretty cool, except maybe giving kids melted plastic isn't a good idea, especially when it turns out that the Thing Maker has some of the most toxic melted plastic that you could give to kids. It's listed as one of the most dangerous toys of all time.
You know, people ask all the time, like, what is it with people today, you know, with, you go to, say, Trump rallies and listening to people talk, and not just there. Jay Leno made a whole career out of stopping people on the street and getting their take on things that were just a little bit off. And I'm now starting to realize it was probably a lot of exposure to melted plastic and other things like that that released God knows what chemicals to people. I think we're all a little bit broken from the toys that we had to play with. I had lawn darts as a kid. We didn't impale anybody, but clearly it happened to other people.
Yeah, people died.
So quirky toys that you played with that you kind of look back and can't believe you played with them. What kinds of things were those? 844-967-2789. To me, it was always amazing that the close and play ever worked. It was a record player, and the only way it would work is the needle for the record was on the top of the case, and you would close the case with the record inside, and then the record would play. But invariably, nobody could leave it just sit there. People thought they could carry it or move around with it, and of course, then the record didn't play at all. But records were the thing back then. There used to be records on the back of cereal boxes. Wow. And you would cut that out and put it on your record player, and it would sound terrible, and your mom would yell at you because you're going to ruin the needle on the record. But that was among the more interesting toys that we had that I can't believe. So yeah, the whole thing with melted plastic and some of the other toys they had back then. Here's you mentioned, what did he say? Did he talk about creepy crawlies? I don't think it was creepy crawlies. Oh, it was squirmels. There was something called squirmels. And the one rule was it would crawl down the wall, but you weren't supposed to get it wet, like a gremlin or something. And of course, everybody got their squirmel wet, and then that ruined it. And who hasn't destroyed a Slinky accidentally? You just pick it up the wrong way and it gets a little twist in there, and you think, oh, I'll just twist it right back. No, you won't. No, it's completely useless at that point. But yeah, Slinkies it was always such a big deal if you could get it to go down the stairs all the way and properly. My God, we were easily entertained back then with a hoop and a stick or climbing trees or whatever. Now compared to all of the video games and everything else that's going there. So we've got a text message coming in from somebody listening out in Waukesha saying, now you got my brain going. Thanks, guys. Used to love and still have the Cast Master. I believe that's what it's called, where you would melt crayons and wax into a mold to make wax Matchbox cars.
Hey, a lot safer than melting plastic.
Melting the crayons instead. It's like we're just moving our way up. At what point was there the liquid molten metal?
I'm sure there was.
My kid's first foundry set. Make your own gold medals for the Olympics. I don't know.
Well, there's one that I didn't own, but I saw commercials for all the time as a kid, and that's Moon Shoes. It's basically little foot-mounted trampolines for jumping around. And any parent who just heard that just started freaking out because that is asking for your kid's ankles to be broken. I didn't get that as a little kid, but I got older and one of my younger sisters, she sprained her same ankle on a trampoline 4 times. We're like, stop going on trampolines.
Oh, yeah. I mean, trampolines are, I know we had friends at one point, their insurance agent just kind of dropped in for a visit. I don't know if they were a friend or an acquaintance or whatever. Came around the corner, saw the trampoline in the backyard, turned right back around and went back to the office and canceled their policy. Because, and we know people who, they've taken a tumble off and have had to go get a cast on their arm, You had lead painted toys. You had something called the Atomic Laboratory Kit. And all it makes me think of is the old Dan Aykroyd Saturday Night Live skit about the bag of glass. And he's like, well, wait, it's a bag of glass. Kids love to play with that. And so Mark responds here from the SAC via text message on the app. It taught you to be careful. And now there are non-toxic options for a plastic goop called patty goop. And we never should have had leaded gas, which in addition to poisoning the environment, damaged the engines. And that's just we didn't really... I hate to say we didn't know. I don't want to take us off the hook. But as we learned more about the dangers of lead, we should have gotten it out of the systems faster. And again, not to take everything back to a political point, but that we still have lead water lines out there. And that we still have Wisconsin legislators saying, well, we don't want to pay for that because it just all goes to Milwaukee anyway. For the love of God, people, help the children and get the lead pipes out of there, Mark noting
I don't care where the lead is. If it's all in one city, I will still pay to get rid of it so you don't have people just dying.
Yeah, exactly. Mark noting as well that he learned how to cast aluminum in junior high. And I remember that as well. Yeah. Yes, we had industrial arts in junior high school, now called middle school in most places. My mother-in-law became a teacher later in life. She was a farm mom, and once her kids were grown and gone, went to school, got her degree, and started teaching. And one of her first things as a substitute teacher was in the industrial arts workshop, in the metal shop or woodworking, I forget what it was. And she had the good sense to make an announcement at the very beginning. I do not know how to turn off any of these machines. If you get stuck, you're on your own. I don't think those kids were ever more careful than they were, thanks to Betty making that announcement that I don't know how to turn these things off. So, kids, you better figure it out.
Hey, that'll keep them cautious at least.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you've got a quirky toy, you can either text us or you can give us a call at 844-967-2789. And so coming back to the topic I began things with on Justice Clarence Thomas, and what is it that we've learned? It's ProPublica again, investigative journalists who, by the way, before I even get into what they found on Clarence Thomas, I'm gonna hedge you off at the pass here. For those of you who are going to say, oh, why are they always investigating the conservative justices? And I'm going to say again, until everybody understands, if Hunter Biden or Sonia Sotomayor or Chuck Schumer or somebody breaks the law, they should be prosecuted, not protected. If Sonia Sotomayor were the one in this article getting all of these luxury trips, and Republicans controlled the Senate and made moves to somehow discipline or even impeach her, I wouldn't be shocked, and I wouldn't be immediately going, oh, no, why would you be doing that? No, if you're doing a bad thing, it should be called out. I mean, well, let's get back to Justice Clarence Thomas, who ProPublica is reporting now, upon further examination, has taken at least 38 vacations, 26 private jet flights, 8 flights by helicopter, a dozen VIP passes to sporting events, and stays at luxury resorts at Florida and Jamaica. And that Thomas appears to have broken the law by failing to disclose the flights, the cruises, and the sports tickets. And it continues to put, a bright light on ethics rules and, whether justices of the U.S. Supreme Court are supposed to follow them and whether there are consequences for not following them. Now, ProPublica also reported in June that Justice Samuel Alito went on a fishing trip in 2008 with a hedge fund billionaire who has had cases before the Supreme Court. Alito traveled on a private jet along with Leonard Leo, a longtime leader of the Conservative Federalist Society, who helped organize the trip. There was a salmon fishing lodge that they all stayed at, owned by another big Republican donor, and Alito subsequently did not recuse himself from a case involving the man's legal interests before the court. And again, it's not to say that you can debate whether they should or shouldn't be accepted, but if they are accepted, they should at least be disclosed. And then, a justice should feel pressure to recuse themselves in instances where there might be a financial interest at play, either in terms of a gift or a campaign donation. It's what made the comments by conservative Wisconsin Supreme Court justices recently even more disingenuous, that when the new progressive majority justices decided that they were going to take another look at recusal rules and other efforts to increase transparency and accountability at the court, the conservative justices, Rebecca Bradley and Annette Ziegler, cried foul and shouted to high heaven that this was some kind of a radical departure, when in fact it was the conservative majority 15 years ago that tried to make things less transparent on the court. And we should not have any kind of a partisan disagreement that state and U.S. Supreme Court justices are not above the law, and they are not above ethics rules. Mark has gotten tired of texting us and has decided to call in and weigh in on today's topic. Mark, hey, how are you doing?
Doing great. And just a brief addendum to the leaded gasoline. There's actually that show on the American Experience called the Poisoner's Handbook, and they actually talked about tetraethyl lead, the additive being created, and the guys that were working with it as an additive to add it to the gasoline were getting lead poisoning. So they gave those guys, safety equipment back in the day, like face masks or something like that, but they just kept putting it into the gasoline. So they actually knew back in the day when they created it that it was bad, and they just went ahead with it anyway.
That's unbelievable.
It was a fascinating program because there's all sorts of other stuff on that American Experience thing, the Poisoner's Handbook. So I highly recommend people check that thing out.
Good.
But it just is the lead. Actually, now they could come out the lead in the gas thing, where they actually told us. And you probably remember when people were complaining about taking the lead out of the gas.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Oh, it's going to damage the engines. They're doing that, but the lead actually caused the obsolescence in those engines that. And they actually damaged the engines.
Yeah,
made them last less long.
Oh, it was anything to honor, the automobile, and all hail the car, whatever has got to be done to, help facilitate its expansion, and what a price we ended up paying for that. Mark, appreciate it so much. Have a great start to the weekend there.
You too, brother.
All right. When we come back, we're going to talk to Dan Schumacher up there in Ashland and find out what he's doing to grow the sports program there. But more importantly, we're going to get a feel for just how insufferable he's become now that the Cubs are starting to get good again. I'm thinking that maybe that Bruce Springsteen concert that was at Wrigley Field night before last, maybe that brought some, New Jersey magic in such a way that, whatever good the Cubs were getting is somehow going to be jinxed now. It used to be a goat. Now I'm hoping it's the other goat, Bruce Springsteen, who does something to keep the Cubs from surging here in the National League Central Division. Anyway, that and much more still ahead as we wrap up a week here from Lake Wissota. So good to be home again on Up North News Radio. Back after this. And there he is now. All right. Where are you at?
I'm in my apartment in Ashland right now.
Oh, okay. Very nice.
My computer, I can't get the connect with my hotspot for my computer, so I got to do it from the phone.
Oh, that's fine. That is just fine.
It is a rainy day on the bay here. I don't even know if you can see that out there because it's so dreary and cloudy and rainy.
Yeah, it really was. I was just updating my radar here, and oh yeah, you still got it here. Yep, it is a big old long system. But
did we get rain in Chippewa? Did we get rain in Chippewa?
Only a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of it's already drying up. It only rained from 4 to 4:30, something like that, and not very heavy. Yeah, a lot of parts of central Wisconsin are getting it. We just once again kind of went between the dots, Anyway, all right. So I got to go figure out. There's really not a ton to talk about sports-wise this weekend, is there?
I think next weekend preseason football opens up, doesn't it?
Actually, we were watching. Yeah, we were watching some last night at Crow's Nest.
Oh,
yep, it's back.
Great day to nap, though. It's nice and dark out.
Oh yeah, yep. All right, got about 10 seconds here. Okay, we have been spending the day with our bumper music saluting American graffiti that came out this day 50 years ago, but we'll make an exception for Dan Schumacher here. What do we have playing this morning?
It's Box of Rain.
Box of Rain?
That's the name of it, yep.
Perfect, because you're up in the Ashland area that is still, you're closer to the center of this storm system, so you're going to have rain for a little while longer yet. By and large, there's this long trail of showers and thunder showers that's stretching right down 51 and 39. Eventually going to work its way past Madison and Wausau and work its way toward Green Bay, Milwaukee. But I'll tell you what, up here in Chippewa Falls, it's looking really nice on the backside of it. Might get some more precipitation later tonight, but Saturday's looking really good. And I'll bet once that clears through, it's going to be awfully pretty up there on Lake Superior as well.
I'm sure it's going to be. Everything is green up here. I mean, they have been getting rain, where down in Chippewa we have not.
So Dan had a belated birthday bash in his backyard last weekend, just up the river from me here, closer to Jim Falls. Nice little band that, as I learned after the fact, these four, I think it was four guys, they were playing some of those Grateful Dead songs for like the first time, they said. They hadn't rehearsed them very much. For that effort, they should really be saluted. It was a very relaxing day, just getting to chat with some of your Chicago buddies and sit out on the lawn and listen to some good live music.
It was, and the other piece is that they're old colleagues of mine. They're three of them are professors from UW Eau Claire, and one is the dean of the Liberal Arts College, which oversees the music department. He's a musician himself. And he's actually from San Francisco. And then Jim Phillips, the lead singer who really directs the band, he has a little bit more acumen to the music. And we talked last year about playing, and he put the group together, and it was a beautiful day, beautiful weather. It was a good crowd. It was the right people at the party. It was a lot of fun.
The thing I really liked about it, not everybody gets to do this, but you have a vacant lot across from you, and a couple of your friends came by way of RV. which I think would be really cool. I'd love to have a couple of friends, just park their RV here and stay for a couple of days, and you got to experience that.
Yeah, we ran 200 feet of extension cord from the house across the street into the empty lot across the street to keep those RVs all air conditioned up, so they could put the air conditioning on in these big, huge beasts that they drove up. But yeah, there was about 5 or 6 RVs, some tents, and that's the way my guys roll. Of course, most of them are deadheads, and we're used to living out of their car.
I was going to say they're used to
living out
this.
of their car back in the day.
Yes, I really was expecting somebody to sell bologna sandwiches out of the trunk just for old time's sake here. So then back to the day job up at Northern College here, where you're busy putting together fall sports, and then the sports of the future for a college up there. What's kept you busy there?
Right now, I'm interviewing for our new wrestling program, both men's and women's wrestling. We have announced and doing some interviews on that. Also doing interviews for some other positions that are being developed. And we're going to do exploratory on college football here soon. So, it's really the higher education itself is struggling right now with overall enrollment. And it's at every school. I just came from conference meetings where you have Martin Luther King. You've got Northwestern University out of St. Paul. You've got St. Scholastica. You name it. The schools that are small liberal arts schools are struggling to keep their enrollment, and the options are getting smaller. There's schools that have been closing. I think we've talked about that before. I mean, Cardinal Stritch closed down the most recent one. It's a dog-eat-dog world right now in higher ed.
Well, and a lot of the big ones get bigger as witnessed by, and I think we got into this last week as well, but what was once the Pac-8, the Pac-10, the Pac-12, is it now the Pac-4? I think is all that's left because of this insane realignment of the really big college leagues. And I mean, maybe in those schools that revenue, works its way into academics as well. But, for smaller schools that don't have a big old TV contract and declining enrollment, I mean, you're right. It really is like two different worlds out there.
I'll give you a quick story, Pat. In 2012, I was athletic director at Division I, Chicago State University. And they flew we had an AD meeting, private meeting out in Santa Monica, California at the Piedmont Hotel. Every Division I athletic director flew in. We had private meetings, and about 5 or 6 of the top ADs in the country that are still in the business basically told the entire room that what is happening, what you're seeing right now has been planned since 2012. And it all involves the fact is they want to break away and build this super conferences for football. Eventually, they will probably win a TV contract, because all Division II and Division III are funded by the television contract for the NCAA tournament. And so the only thing the NCAA actually owns is the basketball tournament. They don't have any control over the playoffs for football or anything like that. So none of that revenue comes in to the NCAA from those football bowl games. It gets distributed back to those Power 5 conferences. So this plan, what's going on, conference realignment, their fingers were wagging at people like me that are at small Division I schools that we better get aligned with a bigger conference, or else you're going to be left behind.
Just something that will continue. I'm sure this is a trend that will just go on for good and for bad in those two very different ways. So, all right, let's get to the National League Central Division here, where the Brewers are in Chicago to play the White Sox, but the Cubs have caught up to the Cincinnati Reds, and so it really is a 3-team fight now for the Central Division. The Cubs are putting up an average of 5 runs per game, which ranks them 5th in Major League Baseball. Is this, from what you see, is this a short-term surge? Are they exceeding expectations, or is this something we're going to watch all 3 teams go down to the wire?
I think it's going to go down to the wire. I really do. I was so surprised to see the Cubs make some moves a couple of weeks ago and acquired some players. They must have known something was on the rise. Jed Hoyer, the president of the Cubs, he must have knew something was coming on, or the young guys were really coming on, and was willing to roll those dice and acquire a couple of key players to help them with this last run to October. So I do believe that the Brewers are playing well. Those three teams are going to battle it out for the next 4 weeks.
All right. And let's see. The Milwaukee Bucks reports say will play on Christmas Day for the 6th straight season, which again is it just tells you how well the team has surged with Giannis and is getting some national TV love. And then finally, NFL preseason is underway. I saw some games on TV at our local watering hole yesterday, so it won't be that much longer till I start making jokes about Jordan Love better not break his leg in week 1.
It's going to be a fun season to watch. I don't know if I'm more intrigued by my Chicago Bears or to see how the Packers are going to do without Aaron Rodgers.
Well, both. And I'll just close by saying I'm already sick of Aaron Rodgers commercials about the Jets on TV. Thank you, Dan. Have a great weekend.
See you soon, Pat.
All right. One last tune to play us out from the American Graffiti soundtrack. Again, you can follow us at UpNorthNewsWI.com. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you Monday. And there we go.
All right.